Few serial killers have fascinated psychologists and criminal investigators like Edmund Kemper. Standing over 6 feet 9 inches tall, intelligent, articulate, and seemingly cooperative, Kemper didn't fit the stereotype of a cold-blooded murderer. He spoke calmly with detectives, volunteered insights into his own psychology, and even participated in interviews that would later shape criminal profiling. But behind that calm demeanor was a series of murders that shook California in the 1970s and left investigators trying to understand how someone so outwardly composed could commit such horrific crimes. This video explores the verified history of Edmund Kemper, the investigation that led to his arrest, and why his case remains one of the most studied in criminal history. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. From an early age, his childhood was marked by instability. His parents divorced when he was young, and he later lived with his mother, a relationship he would later describe as deeply troubled. Accounts from family members and later interviews suggest that Kemper struggled socially and exhibited disturbing behavior during childhood. Some reports describe incidents involving cruelty towards animals and violent fantasies, behaviours that investigators later describe as potential warning signs. Though it's important to note that most children that experience difficult upbringings or display behavioural problems do not go on to commit violent crimes. As Kemper grew older, his isolation and resentment appeared to deepen. At the age of 15, Kemper committed his first murders. He killed his own grandparents while staying at their rural home in California. Afterward, he contacted his mother and later turned himself in to authorities. Because he was still a juvenile, Kemper was later extensively evaluated by psychologists and was sent to a state psychiatric facility rather than a state prison. Doctors later noted that he was highly intelligent, with an exceptionally high IQ, and was capable of discussing his thoughts in incredible detail. Over several years, doctors concluded that he no longer posed a significant threat. In 1969, at age 21, he was released. In hindsight, that decision is one of the most controversial aspects of this case. After his release, Kemper attempted to rebuild a normal life. He held various jobs and became a familiar face around Santa Cruz, California. He even spent some time socializing with local police officers at a local bar, gaining a reputation as an intelligent and friendly conversationalist. This detail has often been highlighted because it demonstrates how easily appearances can be deceiving. To many who knew him casually, Kemper was polite and well-spoken. Privately, however, investigators learned that he had begun acting on some of his violent fantasies. Between 1972 and 1973, several young women went missing around Santa Cruz. Many were college students who had been hitchhiking, which was a common practice at the time. Kemper frequently picked up hitchhikers. Initially, nothing about him seemed suspicious. His appearance was unusual due to his height, but overall he seemed calm and approachable. The disappearances soon became a major concern for investigators. At the time, law enforcement had very little DNA testing available to them compared to what we have today. DNA testing did not exactly exist yet, and investigators relied heavily on witness statements, physical evidence, and patterns connecting individual cases. As the investigation continued, authorities searched for links between the victims, but struggled to identify a suspect. In April 1973, the case took an unexpected turn. Rather than being arrested after a lengthy investigation, Edmund Kemper confessed. After killing his mother and one of her friends, he left Santa Cruz and drove east. Days later, he contacted the police from Colorado. At first, officers struggled to believe him, but he calmly described details that had never been released to the public. Eventually, investigators realized they were speaking to the person responsible for countless heinous murders. Kemper voluntarily waited to be taken into custody without resistance. Following his arrest, Kemper became known for his unusually candid interviews. Unlike many offenders who deny responsibility or minimize their actions, Kemper openly discussed his crimes, his motivations, and his emotional state. His willingness to speak with investigators attracted the attention of psychologists and agents studying violent offenders, and his interviews became one of the many cases used during the early development of behavioural profiling with the FBI. It's important to understand, however, that these interviews represent his perspective. Experts caution that some offenders may exaggerate, rationalise, or reinterpret events to shape how others perceive them. For that reason, modern researchers compare Kemper's statements with investigative records rather than accepting every claim at face value. In November of 1973, Edmund Kemper pleaded guilty to the murders of Maud and Edmund Kemper Sr., Mary Ann Pesk and Anita Lechesa, Iko Koo, Cynthia Ann Shaw, Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu, Clarnell Strandberg, and Sarah Hallett. Rather than seeking a prolonged trial, prosecutors relied on his detailed confessions and the substantial evidence collected during the investigation. He received multiple concurrent life sentences. Since then, he has remained incarcerated in California. Over the decades, Kemper has appeared on parole boards many times. Each request for release has been denied. More than 50 years later, the Kemper case continues to be examined in criminology courses, psychology programs, and law enforcement training. The reasons are numerous. He confessed voluntarily, he cooperated extensively with investigators, and he demonstrated an ability to appear socially functioning while committing serious crimes. And his interviews provided researchers with some insight into how violent offenders think, while also reminding investigators to remain cautious about accepting offenders' own explanations at face value. The case has also prompted discussion about juvenile rehabilitation, psychiatric evaluation, and the limitations of predicting future violent behaviour. Edmund Kemper remains one of the most extensively studied serial killers in American history. His intelligence, his willingness to speak openly after his arrest, and the unusual path that led investigators to him made the case a lasting suspect of research. But behind every single discussion of profiling or psychology were real victims, real families, and lives permanently changed by his crimes. Remembering that human impact is essential when examining cases like this. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting or you just like hearing me talk in general, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment if you're feeling frisky. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye!